President Trump's first month of shock and awe. We're going to break down brand new data about how Americans really feel about what he's doing. Did Americans vote for Elon Musk? The answer might surprise you. Did Stacey Abrams, the galactic emperor of Earth, take $2 billion from taxpayers to fight climate change? And could a huge deal over mineral rights save Ukraine? We're going to cover all that and more today on 10-Minute Drill.
Everybody get up, get up.
Oh, hang on to the roof!
The story of America is the story of an adventure.
Bang! Bang!
I can hear you. The rest of the world hears you.
We are a nation under God, and I believe God intended for us to be free.
Shock and awe. We're going to analyze brand new data on how Americans really feel about President Trump's first month in office. As you know, President Trump came in hot with a flotilla of executive orders, an aggressive agenda, and a hard cabinet push. His focus was on returning to normal and rooting out divisive politics from the government on a number of areas that Democrats had moved to the very far left, giving President Trump the opportunity to take popular actions like protecting women's sports, closing the border, rooting out racial quotas and preferences, and reducing waste, fraud, and abuse in the federal government. New polling yesterday from Harvard-Harris shows people overwhelmingly support the actions he's taking. Deporting immigrants who are here illegally and have committed crimes, 81% support. Undertaking a full-scale effort to eliminate fraud and waste in government expenditures, 76% support. Banning men from girls' sports, 69% support. Eliminating racial preferences in hiring and government contracts, 65% support. President Trump has a 52% approval rating, close to the highest he's ever had. 58% are more satisfied with President Trump than with Joe Biden. That same poll shows approval for Democrats is at 36%. 15 points lower than Republicans. What does this tell us? One, the media and a lot of the national news is very far out of touch with what American people are feeling and experiencing, particularly about how President Trump is doing so far. When you see media coverage at town halls, it's so important to ask, was this organic or was there coordination involved here? As with a very high-profile protest in Georgia last week, MoveOn.org kindly left a paper trail that shows not only did they organize the protest, not only did they call the media to show up at a random town hall in Georgia, but they also wrote the questions for people to ask at this town hall. So again, you have to ask, is this real or is this manufactured? There might be some real anger, but these numbers show us that it's from a much smaller group of Americans that you might think when you turn on your television. President Trump is a change agent representing a shift from the most unpopular president in American history. And what these numbers show us is that honeymoon isn't over yet. Did we vote for Elon and DOGE? One thing we've heard from Democrats a lot recently is, we didn't vote for Elon, we didn't vote for DOGE. But those people couldn't be more wrong. First, we never vote for bureaucrats or cabinet secretaries or people who make these rules for us every day within the federal bureaucracy. But at the same time, we did have exposure into what Elon was planning to do within the federal government. He was a part of rallies as early as October, talking specifically about what DOGE was going to do to reduce fraud, waste, and abuse within our government. Not only that, but there's never been a more popular time to take a chainsaw to the size of the federal government. First, the number one concern of voters in November was high cost of living and inflation. Voters overwhelmingly blame their cost of living on federal government spending. Moving on, in November 2024, Gallup polling showed the highest number of Americans in a decade believe the government is doing too much. Gallup found in 2025, 68% have a negative view of the federal government. A Pew poll found that 56% believe government is almost always wasteful and inefficient. Only 22% said they trust the federal government to do what is right. 60% report feeling frustrated towards the federal government. That takes us to what happened over the weekend. Every federal government employee received an email asking them to list 5 things they accomplished in the previous week. The reaction was swift and outraged. There might be legitimate reasons to push back on that. Security, protocol, proper channels of reporting, completely understand that. But the reaction from government unions was particularly cartoonish. The American Federation of Government Employees called that email cruel and disrespectful. But when 60% of the country disapproves of the way the federal government is operating, you're not going to find a lot of sympathy for tell us 5 things you accomplished this week on our dime. There's no worse face for this fight than those federal government unions that exist solely to protect a lower quality of work. FDR, the center of Democrats' Mount Rushmore, was dead set against the creation of government unions because they set up a dynamic where government workers are negotiating against the American taxpayers. And that's not how this is supposed to work. Elon is starting a very important conversation about the role of the bureaucracy. It's not meant to be a check on the executive branch. It's a part of the executive branch. And that needs to change very, very quickly if we're ever going to see a more efficient government. If not now, when support is this high for changing things, when would that ever happen? Did intergalactic president and former Georgia governor Stacey Abrams bilk taxpayers of $2 billion by pretending to be a climate change expert? The answer is yes. The Washington Free Beacon and Thomas Catenacci, along with the Daily Caller's Nick Pope, report that DOGE found $2 billion earmarked for a group called Power Forward Communities linked to Georgia Democrat Stacey Abrams. Lee Zeldin, the new administrator of the EPA, went on Fox and talked about this and said the grant stipulates that the organization would get $2 billion, but they'd have 90 days to figure out how to learn how to budget. Americans for Public Trust, one of the most important and valuable watchdog groups out there, had a detailed breakdown of their application. This group was only formed to receive this giant climate grant by people who have no experience dealing with climate. They made clear they were only going to get funding from our tax dollars, and their application shows they had less than one tax year before the Biden administration determined that they deserved $2 billion. This is a continuation of a viral video of a Biden administration official telling people getting these climate grants out the door was like throwing gold bars off the Titanic. But you have to remember those gold bars are our tax dollars. When you fill out your tax returns over these next few months, remember that is where so much of that went to. Groups like Stacey Abrams' climate group that has no experience, no understanding of what to do here. One thing that Democrats have historically been good at is finding ways to take our tax dollars and divert them to themselves or to groups that are working on their political agendas, in a lot of cases, their political campaigns. This shows just why DOGE is so important, to root that out and to get politics out of so many processes within our federal government. Is President Trump on the cusp of a major security detail that could save Ukraine? As CNN reported, support for our involvement in Ukraine has dropped significantly over the last 3 years. I think there's 3 reasons for that. 1, this war has continued a lot longer than anyone expected, without a very clean end in sight. 2, President Biden really stopped trying to make a case for the American people's investment in that fight. In step 3, as inflation rose in America and people struggled to afford their own gas and groceries, it became very difficult to justify sending billions and billions more. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent wrote in the Financial Times, this economic partnership could protect the Ukrainian people and the U.S. taxpayer and be mutually beneficial and would give the U.S. a vested interest in the future of Ukraine, both in the conflict now and in the rebuild to come. Last week, a Maine state representative broke the internet when she highlighted that a biological male athlete had won the women's high school pole vaulting championship just 1 year after placing 5th in that competition as a male. President Trump came out hard and said Maine would not be receiving any more federal assistance for education until they followed his executive order and Title IX, protecting women's sports. Governor Mills now has to decide whether allowing boys and girls sports, something that's deeply unpopular, is worth losing hundreds of millions of federal education dollars for the state of Maine. Lastly, I wanted to talk about why we're doing 10-minute drill. This is a 10-minute political update. What's going on? What's not? We're going to keep it to these 10 minutes. We'll have friends that come on and we might do overtime segments, but our goal is to show you what's going on and what's not. We're going to keep it fast. We're going to keep it light. You got plenty going on in your lives. But to highlight why we're doing this, a quick informal mailbag of some of the responses I got from friends and family when I talked about doing this. Question 1, why are you doing this? Doing what I do and having worked throughout government, corporate America, advising everyone from senators to House candidates to presidential candidates, if there's anything I can do to help cut through the noise of what's going on with media that's reliable and sometimes unreliable, I'd love to do that for you. Question 2, there are too many podcasts. Not really a question. I expect this to be a little bit different. It won't be for everybody, but it will be a 10-minute fast update to help you cut through the noise before you move into your larger media diet throughout the day. Question 3, who do you think you are? I feel like I already answered that, Mom. Join us here every Tuesday and Thursday morning. We're going to have a lot of fun. You can find us on X, YouTube, Rumble, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. Thank you for tuning in.